Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about Oliver Stone's Snowden. Join me, will you? So, in Snowden, we meet Edward Snowden, the CIA and NSA analyst who, after learning of and kind of helping to develop our government's rather intrusive surveillance techniques, decides to leak thousands of classified documents to the press, informing the public just how much Big Brother is watching. And with Snowden, we get our second S-titled film in the month of September from a rather political filmmaker, the first of which obviously being last week's Sully from director Clint Eastwood. And knowing from the outset that Snowden's director, Oliver Stone, has for nearly 45 years now, made films dealing with subjects as divisive and controversial as the Vietnam War, Wall Street, the band The Doors, the JFK assassination, Nixon, 9/11, and George W. Bush, it really came as no surprise at all when it was announced that he was making a film about Edward Snowden. But whether or not I agree with Stone's political views or the message that he chose to infuse into this film, I still had to applaud him for making a film that was, for the most part, as measured, restrained, and guarded as this one. Throughout this film, I saw a director that smartly recognized that were he to swing too hard in any one direction, he would lose his audience, stiff-armed by their desire not to be preached to or manipulated. But make no mistake, after 45 years of doing this, Stone can be quite the master manipulator. So on Snowden, for example, he knew he needed to spend as much time as possible playing and presenting characters and events counter to what he ultimately wanted the viewer to walk away believing. So, specifically, he knew that he couldn't make this film's antagonists, these mustache-twirling, completely unrelatable villains, and that he cast the fantastic Rhys as one of the primary spokespersons for the opposition, and really took the time to establish him as this supportive, caring, almost father figure for Ed, certainly helped in that. And on the other side of that coin, Stone also knew that he couldn't make his protagonists these flawless knights in shining armor, which in my opinion did help to produce one of the most successful elements of the film, that being the relationship between Ed and his girlfriend, Lindsay. Both in the writing as well as in their performances, they really were able to capture something that felt realistically broken and imperfect, willfully highlighting the shortcomings that any real relationship endures. And I think in that what Stone's hope was as we found ourselves getting caught up in the relatability of that relationship and how Snowden chose to act in it, we would in turn find ourselves getting caught up in the relatability of how Snowden chose to act in the film's central conflict. And as a side, I've got to say, I thought that Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Shailene Woodley had fantastic chemistry and really brought the best out of each other throughout the film. And Stone's desire to hold the audience's engagement, support, and just general goodwill certainly had an effect on the way that the film was shot as well. For the most part, there was nothing that glamorous about the shot composition, colors, lighting, or locations, each consistently striving to capture something that never felt too slick or Hollywood. Of course, that didn't mean that the film was somehow completely devoid of any interesting cinematography, locations, or blocking. And actually, I regularly found myself noting great choices that Stone had made that felt appropriate to the drama that was happening on screen. So if a character was drunk and finding it difficult to maintain focus, the camera itself would kind of sway back and forth, struggling to kind of frame things up in just the right way. Or if two characters were fighting one another, the camera movements would feel loose and unpredictable. Or my favorite, if a character was feeling small and out of his depth, he would be placed in a room with a wall-sized Skype monitor on which his superior would lord down over him, a la the Wizard of Oz. And it felt very intentional too that Stone, for the most part, kept the timeline of this film relatively close to reality, avoiding skipping to or elongating the more externally thrilling elements of the story. Again, all in the name of making the audience relate to and believe what they were watching. Nonetheless, even as I can talk about certain instances where Stone kept his cool and played his cards close to the chest, there were other moments, numerous times throughout the film, where just his very passionate beliefs came bursting forth, which, in some instances, I am completely fine with because this is in fact a film and has every right to represent and reflect its maker's beliefs and ideas. What I do take issue with, though, is when that actually gets in the way of good storytelling. And unfortunately, there were a number of moments where Stone chose to bring the narrative to a grinding halt simply to have Gordon-Levitt monologue for a number of minutes about why he was doing what he was was doing and why it was the correct course of action. None of which, surprise, surprise, felt particularly cinematic. And I won't spoil you with specifics, but the way that this film ended, well, let's just put it this way. It might as well have been the end of an Oprah episode, where the cheesy music swells, the guests and host embrace and weep, and the crowd cheers. Now, were I reviewing films even 2 or 3 years ago, talking about a film like Snowden probably would have stressed me out just a little bit, if only because the political arena has never been something that I've been that knowledgeable in or passionate about. But as time has gone on, I have grown more and more interested in films like this, and even have just a little bit enjoyed the discussions that are ignited through them, so long as 2 truths are made known at the outset. Number 1, I, Chris Hartwell, do not know everything about the subject matter on which that film is focusing, and number 2, and probably more important, neither does the filmmaker, even if that filmmaker is as awesome or passionate as Oliver Stone, Clint Eastwood, Aaron Sorkin, or even Michael Moore. And I think it's just so helpful removing the expectation that a film can be, or even needs to be, anything more than a springboard upon which we, the audience, can launch into further exploration and discussion about the real-life events, people, and ideas presented in them. And it's on those merits, and the merits that I just listed above, that I will give Snowden a 3.5 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film, so definitely comment below and let me know. And also, before I close things out, I have to give a very special shout out and thank you to Brandon, who's a brand new patron of mine on patreon.com. Thank you so much, Brandon, for pledging your hard-earned dollars to my Patreon campaign. It means the world to me, and specifically because you have pledged that money and because of all the other patrons that have pledged money, I'm right now able to work on my very first film of the past review for The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And I am just having a blast doing this. Even though finances are still quite low on Patreon and I'm only kind of able to take off just a few hours a week on this review, I'm still able to do it, and that's just amazing. So thank you, Brandon, and thank you to the rest of my patrons for making this possible. It really is awesome, and I cannot wait to share with you what I'm putting together with that review. And to the rest of you guys, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.